and say everyone's birthday. Just to introduce ourselves to the author, Oliver. Hi, I'm Sandy.
Hi, Sandy. Nice to meet you again.
Hi, can you hear me?
I can hear you. I can't see you, unfortunately.
Yeah, we can hear you.
But we can hear
I'm
you.
Marianne.
Hi, perfect. Hi, Marianne. There you are. Hi.
I'm Stephanie.
Sandy, I think Sandy's in the way, but hi, Stephanie. Hi, great, with the dog. Beautiful dog.
I'm Tanya. Hello.
Hi, Tanya. Hi.
Megan.
Mika.
Rachel. Katie.
Rachel.
Rachel.
Another Rachel?
Olivia.
Okay.
Olivia.
Hi.
Jesse. Kendra.
I'm Allie.
And Allie's right there.
I'm Debbie.
I'm Allie.
Yeah, I did. I'm Desi.
And there's a... Uh-oh, I'm on me.
Oh.
Hi, it's me. It looks like there's a couple of beautiful dogs there.
Yes. Oh, that one down there is Carla.
Yeah. Oh, they look great. It's great to meet everybody.
Follow the live tweet. Just follow at Ability to Thrive. And thanks in advance to Alice Wong, who is doing the wonderful live tweeting for us. The hashtag for this discussion is going to be Thrive Book Club. And you can also feel free to check out Alice Wong's own project called Disability Visibility, which is an awesome project that she has going on where she's been interviewing people in the disability community so that we can record our own history. So now that we've got ourselves all introduced, I just want to just thank Cammie again for taking the time out to talk with us today. And then we're going to go ahead and get started with the questions on the list. Cool?
Cool.
All right. So, start off with, I was wondering, because, you know, as an author who doesn't have a disability, I thought that the insight of the characters that you wrote were particularly not just deep, but like kind of really weirdly accurate. And I was wondering, like, what kind of research did you do to get into Amy and Matthew's heads? Yeah.
So great first question to start out with and to get started. Some of you might have already heard my background, that I am the parent of an 18-year-old with autism, pretty severe autism, and when he was first diagnosed at 3 years old, I got together with a group of other mothers and we started an organization called Whole Children that's out here in Western Massachusetts that does recreation programs, weekend, after school, summer camp kind of programs it was originally for young kids with disabilities, and now it's expanding to young adults and all ages with disabilities. And so my background is as an outsider really, but as a very close outsider, who has been thinking about my own son and all of his friends in this group. So I feel like I know and have watched grow up a lot of these kids with disabilities. And so when I went to write my first young adult novel, I really wanted to get to have a character at the center who had a significant enough disability that it was a defining factor in her life, but I didn't want that to be the issue of the book. I wanted it to be that there were other issues going on, and this was just a given. So I'm going to get to Sandy's question in the first place, but that's what I felt like there were not enough books like that where there's characters presented with disabilities that are getting on with their life, because that's one of the main things I've noticed, or I marvel at with my son and these other kids I know, is that life, you get over the tragedy or the whatever, you adjust to the disability pretty quickly and life goes on and other problems present themselves, but it's not like that's the main tragic factor, defining factor in anybody's in these kids' life. So when I went to do research, I actually started, I'm going to hold up a little picture because my son's girlfriend is one of the first girls that was starting, and she's got cerebral palsy. Let's see if you can, where do I hold it up? Right there, you can see. So that's Ethan and Alexandra, and I feel like I've grown up with Alexandra. I've watched her grow up, and we've grown up with her. And she's not Amy, but she was where we started with it. That's them going to prom, just to give you a little bit. And then I read stories. So the Matthew character came later, and I had to do a lot of research for OCD, but not so much for CP, because I'd known Alexandra and her mom. I interviewed her mom a lot on all the early treatments and therapies that you do. I probably know a lot more about cerebral palsy from watching everything they were doing all along the way as she was growing up, because we've known her since she was 3.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, getting back to what you were saying about how the medical condition is not the main plot line.
Yeah.
And that's one of the real values of what I found in this book, is that it was a sort of a lifestyle that I could relate to, like my medical condition and my disability is not the plot line itself, and what the shenanigans that I'm getting into with my friends, and like school and internships and work, all that stuff. And so that's what I really appreciated and really liked about the book. So,
oh, good.
Yeah. So now we're gonna get into. Somebody else want to ask another question? Marianne?
Can you explain what cerebral palsy is?
So there's a huge variation. There's a huge spectrum of cerebral palsy, and it's basically I believe, and I'm not a doctor, but it stems from a lack of brain damage at a certain point. It is not at a certain point, usually in the birth process or early in life or in utero, and it has a wide range of how affected a person can be, controlling muscles, speech, great variety having to do with where the brain was impacted, but it is not degenerative, at least as far as I know. You don't get worse as you go along. There's nothing genetic about it, so you don't give it to your children. And there's a lot that many therapies can. Alexandra's mother was an amazing one for knowing how much, when she was first born, it was predicted that she would never roll over, walk, talk, or really function at all. She had very severe cerebral palsy, and it's remarkable how far she's come. Remarkable how far she's come. So it's also not a predetermined what will happen, I guess.
Hi, my name is Jessie.
Hi.
I was wondering what motivated you to write this story.
Did it begin as a story about Amy and Matthew, or did it begin as a story about a young woman with CP or a young man with OCD?
That's a great question. It started because I knew a character like Amy better. It started with that character, and my original idea was that I really wanted to write about a character who looked very different on the outside, and that many typically developing kids would connect to and understand, which is not like my son. My son's brain is very different. He actually looks pretty normal, but I was really fascinated by the idea of how much a seemingly severely disabled girl how much she had in common, and in fact how much my son has in common now that he's hitting adolescence, has in common with his typically developing peers. So I wanted to tell that story, and I wanted her to meet somebody and develop her first real friendship. And the Matthew character, at first, when I was first writing it, I had him be, I just had a very different character who was like a big, arrogant football player. I wanted her to be with somebody that she could cut down to size and she would really teach him a lesson. And it didn't feel right at all. It didn't work at all. And so I tried to find somebody else. And what I realized is that what Amy is really good at is talking about and dealing with her own disability, and that she's had to do that all her life. She is so well, she is well adjusted to the reality of her life and to who she is and what she is, and she knows that. She is honest in a way that most teenagers are not. And I wanted to find someone that she would meet somebody who that was everything he wasn't. So when you have OCD, and I had to do a lot of research on that, but the secrecy and privacy is one piece of it, and that it's a very confusing brain anxiety disorder that actually a lot of us can relate to, because a lot of us have tried to deal with anxiety by setting up little games with ourselves. And OCD is the extreme version of that. But it's also about keeping it a secret. And I wanted somebody that Amy would see and recognize, you have a disability as well, and you need to talk about it, that the beginning of getting better, and it's her strength is what's going to help him, that she can be better at something than him, and he's going to need her. And that was where it seemed like a good balance to them. So Amy definitely came first, and who I knew and understood first, and then I did a lot of research to understand Matthew better, if that makes sense.
Thank you.
I think that having the peer groups, provide the language around their own disabilities, that was a really empowering characteristic throughout the plot, because so often, as the only child with a disability in my family, like, my parents will be the ones speaking and explaining my condition for others, especially in a school setting or at university. And so watching Amy help Matthew come to grips with, or not come to grips, but like realizing that he has OCD and that it is not only adaptable, but something that he can really work with, that was cool to see, because we don't really see Matthew's mom jumping into the scene and like really pressuring him to like talk about OCD all the time, or we don't see Matthew's mom like playing a more active role,
Right.
In school. So that was really cool.
Or get help, or be kind of honest, or confront it. Right.
Right.
But
and I think
it's not easy to do. That's what like the part where Amy gets to college. Did you find the transition to college was okay for you?
I think actually we we talked about that a little bit as a group. Does anybody want to sum up what we thought? Yeah.
I think you did a really good job about addressing. Carol, I'll move up. I think you did a really good job addressing sort of what Amy's anxieties would be.
Mm-hmm.
Which is hard to do, to get inside someone else's head. The thing that sort of struck me as strange was Amy's mother's transition.
Oh my gosh, yes.
She spent so much time trying to teach Amy to be independent, and then she does a 180 and sort of traps her in this place where she's not really able to reach her full potential, and the problem isn't solved until Amy has a meltdown.
Mm-hmm. I'm part of that. So was that frustrating to read? Yes.
Yeah.
But part of that is when you've got, as a fiction writer, you have to have an adversary setting up. You have to set up tough situations. I think this was my instinct, that the story gets better when the stakes get higher and there's something harder for them to overcome. But it's interesting that, and you have to be not afraid to make, to put a villain in the story. And I do think her mother becomes the villain. But it was also, I hope I understood where that mother was coming from, because as a mother, it is incredibly hard to know when to pull back with your child and let your child have their own life. I would never have done the things that she did, but I would understand where it came from. That you believe that you have to fight for that child's right to and to prove constantly their ability, and it's very hard. She crosses a bunch of lines. I think she's way out of line, a lot of it, especially towards the end when she's getting more frantic. But I had to try so that Amy could have be pushed to the point where she has to have a meltdown to, and the mother can see she's not helping anymore at all. In fact, Amy's got to make bad decisions in order just to be able to make her own decision, I think.
I think Marianne has another question.
So, as a mother with a child with a disability, what do you find, what do you and your child find most difficult about the disability and how it impacts their life?
Now that's an interesting question. I think one of the main things that I've learned from having a child with a disability, when you're the parent, there's a whole period where you mourn terribly what you believe is going to be the hard life that is up ahead for your child, and the loss. Especially, it was our first son, and we had a whole period of grieving the loss of that life that we pictured having for him. And what your child teaches you is to get over yourself when you're the parent. And I think that children's impulse is to go on living, and children adapt much more quickly to their own limitations, or whatever the confines and whatever their life is going to look like. I think children do an amazing job of adapting to that and teaching their parents, come on, let's get on with it now. Okay, I'm in this wheelchair, or okay, I want to go and do these things. That was part of what I learned in setting up Whole Children, was how eager they were for socializing, for getting out and doing things like their peers. I think my son tends to be pretty happy-go-lucky with his life. That doesn't look like, he won't go to college. He won't live independently probably, but he has a lot of things that he loves, great passions and music and interests and theater. So I think those are the kinds of things. I'm trying to think what he would say is hard about his disability, because I don't think he thinks of himself as all that different. He's always blaming his autism when he gets in trouble, but he doesn't think of it as a huge problem. The rest of us do. The rest of us get sick of it sometimes. I think there's an equal, I don't mean to sugarcoat it, but there's a lot of really important lessons that having a family member with a disability teaches the whole family. And it's a lot to do with getting on with life and getting over yourself and adapting and then moving on, knowing what you want to do and doing it. And I feel like he definitely does that.
We have another question from Mika.
What would you like young people or a reader to take away from the book?
Oh, I hope that I would like to see a lot more books that feature characters with disabilities, and hopefully in ways that anybody reading the book can start to recognize there's far more in common than they might expect or realize. So one of the main things I'd like to take away is that it demystifies kids in high school who have been going to school with peers with disabilities that might not be in their classroom or might be in the back of their classroom. I would like the other kids to turn around and recognize that this is a kid worth getting to know, that they would have more in common than they realize, that not to be scared of someone who communicates in a different way or looks different or operates in a different way, and that the pleasures that there are in recognizing and bridging those gaps. I'm hoping that's what people will take away.
Does anybody have another question like that?
We've got Stephanie just typed. Can I click on Stephanie? I have something I would like to say. Can I click on you, Stephanie?
Yeah.
Okay.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. I haven't read your book.
Okay.
But I would like to. I can relate to that with your son, because I'm the only one in my family that has a disability.
Okay.
And I go away from school, and I'm gonna be a senior in college, so it's a lot of stress going on, figuring what I want to do when I graduate, where I want to live, and all these what do you call it, services and all that other stuff. So how did you find out that your son had a disability? How did you recognize it?
Well, that was a long time. That was when he was very young and late to doing everything like talking, late to most of his milestones. What you're at another huge transition, which some of these people have already been through, but the graduating from college. So you're in your senior year of college and you've done it. You've gotten through college, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
And to be really proud of. But then there's a whole, okay, what now? Transition. And the good news is, hopefully, there's going to be support out there. Do you live in Massachusetts?
I do.
Yeah. And hopefully this group, are you part of this group?
Yes.
Yeah, good. It seems like there's good, it all seems to me about community is so important, and in a way, one of the things that disability, if you've got the right community, like a group like this is actually what a lot of kids don't have, that are everyone is facing a huge, daunting, dark, because I've got a niece and a nephew who are right now, they're 1 year, they just finished college last year, and they're both having a lot of problems, and they're not disabled at all. And in a way, or there not a lot of problems. It's a adjustment. You're adjusting to working and figuring all of that out. It's going to be a but you're going to do it with the help of other people who have been through this, who know, who can find one little job is what you need, a few hours here and there, and figuring it out, not taking on too much at a time, figuring out your social world, and one group is what one good friend. That's how I think of it. One little piece at a time is my thing. I'm going to click back onto the group because there was somebody else who. Sorry, I kind of interrupted to click on to Stephanie. Was there somebody else about to say something?
It doesn't matter. Okay. Oops, sorry. Hello.
Hi.
It's Tanya again.
Hi.
Hi. So my question is, since you did say you're interested in there being more books about people with disabilities for young adults in particular, and since you've written this book, are you planning on continuing and writing other books to follow this?
Nice question.
As well as, are you targeting other specific disabilities, disability types, and so forth? There's sort of two questions in one. Sorry about that.
No, that's okay. Great question. Thank you. I do have another book that's coming out in the fall, in October of 2015, so this year, and that's similar in spirit to Say What You Will, only one of the central characters has cognitive disability, but it's a love story, and it's based on another young woman I know from Whole Children, who is the world's most passionate, Pride and Prejudice, Colin Firth, Masterpiece Theater, romantic. She's the most romantic, and so and she also has Down syndrome, and she's falling in love for the first time. It's also based on, there's two typically developing teens who are volunteering in a class that we have at Whole Children called Boundaries and Relationships, about sexuality for young adults with disabilities. And I feel like that's a kind of new and growing area that we need to have more education in this, and hopefully it's going to start. I'm curious how much this group, especially if you're out of high school for a while, had sexuality and development and human development and all relationship development classes like that in high school. And I'm hoping that we start to have more of those classes and open up those possibilities more. So it's about a young woman like that trying to fall in love for the first time and what happens.
I have a question. So, the Thrive program, the group that you're talking to, we're a community of women with disabilities, and we're really trying to push these conversations around the need for a more realistic and accurate representations of disabilities in the media, whether it's books, movies, shows.
Which is a wonderful, wonderful effort. Yeah.
And by having this conversation right now, we're making an effort to start that process of encouraging conversations around this. And I was wondering if you could suggest any ideas on how other people or how we could continue these conversations.
Well, I think this is terrific. There's this whole movement right now called We Need Diverse Books. And it started actually with some writers of color, and it started about a year ago when at the National Comic-Con, I guess, so the comics, was a panel this was a main conference for young adult writers, and the main panel was all white, and there was only one woman, so it was all men basically, and they were all white men. And so they started a movement called We Need Diverse Books, and I think it's done a wonderful job of trying to show the reality of what our population now looks like in America, but and here, let's have books and characters reflect the population that is at large, and not presume that young kids of all colors will always relate to a white main character. And I feel like disability has a huge place in there, because I feel like disability, when you look at the real statistics of the population, that in the last census, disabled teens between the ages of 16 and 20 who are identifying themselves as severely disabled enough to impact their ability to live independently as adults. So that's a little bit more than ADHD. That's saying we're pretty severely disabled, is 1.2 million kids between the ages of 16 and 20 in America. That makes it the largest minority group there is. And that's very surprising to most people. That means there's more kids identifying as significantly disabled than anybody realizes. And we need to see what that looks like. And we need to talk about it. And we need to understand how big that is. And it also is, what's a little bit hard is, every disability can't necessarily connect to each other or see what they have in common. And I think we have to start thinking about, we all have some of the same challenges, and people with mental health issues do have some of the same challenges as people with physical disabilities and developmental disabilities have, and cognitive disabilities. Like, we have to sort of make sure we're not saying, oh, I don't connect to you at all, and I don't want you part of my group. I feel like it's going to be a growing, and groups like this is where it starts. Your group right here is wonderful to look at, because it's connecting. You're connected in pairs, an older and a younger mentor, and then you're getting together in groups, and that seems to me a wonderful place to start, and to keep insisting on it. So there's been lots of different things about writing to publishers about. This is just for publishing. I feel like we could get it in movies and TV shows beyond just Glee. We could use more disabled characters all around. Letter writing campaigns, that kind of thing. We're on the cusp of it.
Yeah, I mean, getting back to what you were saying about how the population of young adults who identify as being severely disabled, that being the largest minority, but when we go into bookstores, we see bookshelves filled with like paranormal, like There are more books about vampires and wizards and witches than there are about real people and real issues. And I'm not bashing Harry Potter, because I love Harry Potter, and but I do think that this is an important discussion to have, and I appreciate the perspective that you shared. Is there another question or comment, Katie?
Okay, as a disabled individual who is in a very serious romantic relationship, I have to ask, how did you come up with Amy having a baby? Like that, it seemed to me like quite a leap. You have so many changes going on for Amy as it is, and then all of a sudden we get this big bombshell as readers. Do you want me to move up?
No, I can hear you. No, I'm thinking about this question. Keep going.
Not that I don't think that subject should be addressed, because I do fully and completely, but I'm just wondering how you came to the decision to make that leap, and sort of what went into your thought process.
Okay, that's a great question, because I feel like some people have read the book and feel like the last third of it, at least it seems as if I've read on Goodreads or a little bit of, this book is a great book, and then it kind of goes off the rails a little bit in the last third, where just all this bad stuff is happening. And I think some people, it's kind of almost like wrecked the book for them. And that's not a lot of people, but I've read that in there. I feel like the reason I wanted to do it, and it's good for a writer to go back and think about decisions like that. I wanted the Amy in the first half is actually so self-confident and poised, and part of me wanted, she's nothing like I was in high school, where I had a fraction of her challenges and I was so much shyer that, and in a way I loved writing that whole who she was in the beginning, where she has almost no problem speaking so honestly to everybody, and sure, she makes a few like wobbly bad decisions at prom of whatever, agreeing to Sanjay's bad plan, but I think that number one, wanted to make sure that sexuality was part of this story. If you're doing a romantic story about two kids with disabilities, I wanted sexuality to be part of it, and I wanted her to have an active and real sex drive and sexuality, and want to have that, because I think that is a much more realistic truth and reality, and the world needs to see this and understand this better, and we parents need to see it and understand it better. And I think I wanted her to be really driven back by something, by an event, and also that she had to make a decision that her mother wouldn't agree with at all, and she was going to do it anyway, and that her determination, this was my thinking in having her go through with it, and then Matthew could come and try to understand what she was going through. Hopefully this makes sense. I'm not sure everybody needs to agree with. There's a balancing act when you're a writer with a story of trying to keep the story alive, trying to keep the story have enough tension and conflict and things at stake that you end up having bad things happen or bad judgments, bad decisions, in order to keep your story going, that your characters have to then deal with the fallout. So that was basically it. I wanted her to really be driven back into self-reflection, and then come out the other end having come to some new decisions. I also wanted her to be able to survive it, and she lives through it, and then is gonna figure out what kind of life she wants after that.
All right. So my name is Rachel, and I just want to applaud you, number one, for writing about this topic that's really taboo for a lot of people. But one thing that I'm kind of bothered by is the fact that, for young people with disabilities, and myself included when I was in high school, my biggest concern wasn't, oh my God, I'm single and I don't have a boyfriend. It was, how am I going to support myself in the long term? And I just want to say, well, it's all well and good to focus on love and romance. I think in reality, there's this huge problem facing young people with disabilities, that you go through college or you go through a transition program, and after that, you don't have a job, you don't have a way to support.
I couldn't agree with you more.
Keep
going, Sharon.
Your parents, or you're in a group home, and for people with developmental disabilities, it's especially severe.
Yes.
And so again, while I applaud you for addressing this, I'm wondering if you have any plans in the future of bringing public awareness to this even bigger threat that faces young people with disabilities.
I am so glad you said that, because I feel like that is the next great challenge that lies ahead. And it's really my son becoming 18 years old and looking around at his friends and realizing the statistics are terrible at this point. for and very capable in young adults with disabilities not being able to find decent employment is the greatest challenge we have. And in fact, it comes up in my next book, but you're even saying that makes me want to write about it more, because that to me matters. It's real. You're just so right. Love and all of that is terribly important. That's one piece of it. But in fact, I think after this, I'm not going to write about this exact issue, because I'm actually writing a middle grade book, kind of different. But I think that would be my next one, would be something about trying to find meaningful place in the world and the reality of that, a meaningful, productive possibilities in the world. And I think some people do. It's a daunting prospect. We need to change laws and legislations to support the businesses that will hire. We need to do a lot of work. Massachusetts is a pretty good place to work, to live, I think, for getting support. But I'm not liking some of the stuff they've been doing recently about changing laws. They're opening up opportunities, but that we need to do more. That's what I think for ensuring employment for young adults. It's a big issue.
Well, we're coming short on time now.
Okay.
So, I did want to thank Cammie again so much for taking the time out of your day, especially because it is the New Year weekend. So thank you for taking time to participate in the discussion with us.
Thank you guys.
I definitely learned a lot, and it's always cool to understand the other perspective behind the book. So before we sign off, I did just want to let folks know about the Unempowered Woman campaign that our group is participating in. I'm going to leave all kinds of links down below on the YouTube box. You can also check out the Letter to Thrive Tumblr if you haven't already. That's where we have submissions from women with disabilities who write letters to their younger selves. Again, all of those links will be down below in the YouTube box. But yeah, I can only speak for myself, but I had a blast, continuing this discussion around the need for not only diverse books, but diverse topics and more accurate representation of disability in media and literature, particularly for young adults. And let's see, what else? Do I have any other notes here? Oh, well, I also did want to give a shout out to another, I know we sort of saw pictures of Cammie's son, but another shout out to another family member in Cammie's family is her sister, Elizabeth McGovern, is in Downton Abbey, and season 5 premieres tomorrow night, so check it out. So that's cool. Sorry, I didn't mean to embarrass you if I did.
No, it's perfect because it's starting tomorrow night. And I think this coming season, not that I know that much, but it's going to be a good one. I think she says she thinks it's better than last season. And there was stuff that she was really excited about.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you.
Can I just say thank you guys so much. This was a great group to visit with, and it's just great to see everybody together, and I love the idea of this program. Thank you guys all. This was a pleasure. Bye-bye.